We know the political weaponization, a huge part of Washington, D.C. and the government. You know, the task force and all the working groups that D.C. loves. Well, Oversight Project President Mike Howell has a bolder plan brewing. Instead of more subcommittees, Howell says that Trump should launch a full-blown Truth Commission to expose the political weaponization. So Mike is kind enough to join us here with more. So let's get into this Truth Commission. I mean, I look at this and I say, ooh, Mike Howell, in that city, truth is hard to come by. So what are we looking at here?
So basically, you laid it out there. We got all these ad hoc efforts, which basically are fighting internal to the bureaucracy, trying to uncover things, whether it's agency by agency. There's these discrete, siloed off efforts. And I think the answer to the problems and, frankly, the political promises that have been made about de-weaponizing the government have been there the whole time in terms of historical precedent. Various countries and even the United States, over their course of, the course of history, have developed basically truth and reconciliation commissions or committees, what have you, to deal with like some of the biggest historical events and abuses. And I think that's what we're looking at when we look at what happened over the Biden administration. It's not just the Department of Justice or just the FBI. It is a series of agencies working together across the enterprise of government, working with industry, with media. And so to understand that, to study that, and yes, to hold people accountable for it, and then to also provide restitution for those harmed by it, we need something bigger than what we have now. We need something of a Trumpian caliber. And I think that is a Truth and Reconciliation Committee to study and account for the Biden weaponization.
I mean, Howell, at this point, I'm ready to throw more than spaghetti at the wall. Give me anything that might actually affect the structural reforms we need. So to me, this sounds, appealing because we got to try something. You can already see, right? The administration, like most people have gotten in now, it's starting to settle down, and you can already see now the actual war is going to begin. Are we really going to do what we said we're going to do? You got a lot of good people there. There's a lot of other people who don't want to do it. Congress is up to its usual tricks. So how exactly would this work and get us where we need to go? I mean, you argued that the task forces, they lack coordination, power, and focus, and that somehow if we set up this Truth Commission, we would get those things, presumably.
Yeah, absolutely. The problem is largely structural, and it's also behavioral. When you get a cabinet secretary who takes over basically a hostile department or agency, their agenda is going to be primarily forward-looking. They have their own things they want to roll out to execute for the president on. It is hard for a cabinet secretary or even an FBI director to look backwards and to trust the bureaucracy to turn over documents, to investigate itself, all while they're trying to marshal the same agency in another direction. It creates a conflict of interest almost, and certainly a conflict of time and attention. And we learned this lesson in the first Trump administration. There was a lot of efforts to hold Hillary Clinton accountable, to even produce documents that could help inform what her and Obama did. And the first Trump administration decided not to do that, not to release those things, and to basically let Hillary and co. off. And I fear that we're making the same mistake again right now. And it's for good reasons and for bad. But ultimately, it's really structural. You need an entity that can sit atop and a part of the entire federal government and not work through the same offices that you're investigating. It needs to be able to, this commission, to have the full powers of government. I'm talking about prosecutorial powers, the power to subpoena, the power to grant immunity, perhaps to recommend pardons, and then also the ability to use government funds to make wrongs right. And once that exists outside of the standard apparatus that we're used to, I think things start moving along when it is no longer just one on a list of 20 things for a cabinet secretary, but you have individuals with no other concentration but solving for and accounting for the weaponization. And it solves a huge political problem. I mean, I opened the op-ed with this. Everyone in the world knows that accountability isn't being meted out at a good enough pace during this administration. I think President Trump would agree with that. I think his cabinet secretaries would agree with that. People on the outside agree with that. And so it's not controversial to diagnose the problem we all want solved And I think I'm offering up something that could be a solution to everybody's problem.
Yeah, I think we would all agree with that as well. Go ahead and add our names onto that list. Now, I want to know where the origin of this would live at, because when we were in Washington, D.C., hanging out with you, and our investigative journalist Steve Baker joined us, and we were talking to him about all of the J6 stuff, as we usually do out there. And he was saying, well, Donald Trump had asked Speaker Mike Johnson to go ahead and form a new J6 committee. And, well, we were all kind of looking around and saying, wait, where is that, right? Donald Trump himself said, Speaker Johnson, we need this to happen, right? So that's my question to you is, where do we want to see the origin of this to get started? Because it's still difficult when you have the president asking for this directly himself.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And so it certainly wouldn't involve Congress in any way, shape, or form. Congress is where oversight goes to die. It's why we started the Oversight Project, and have proven you can get a lot further if you're aggressive on the outside with investigators and litigation. But what you essentially need are the powers of the federal government, the powers to gather information, to compel testimony, to resource things. And then you combine this with the force of civil society and external experts. I mean, one parallel here, and I hesitate to use the term parallel, but look at the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa that gained international acclaim. They partnered with Amnesty International and a lot of other folks to bring in the expertise and to set the whole operation up. But also a secondary point of this whole exercise is that it accords Biden weaponization the spot it deserves in history. Like, when you take a step for a nation to establish a commission to look at these egregious abuses, what you're also doing is saying, we as a people recognize what happened was so severely wrong. We need to take these unusual steps to account for it. And so just by the very act of stepping into the history of some of these other, reconciliation commissions or committees, you are putting it in its proper context, where it cannot be, again, just one of 50 things that an FBI director or an attorney general or even Secretary of Homeland Security has to deal with. They got other problems they need to solve, and you could see the friction that's really distracting them from a lot of other things on their plate, because you have a base that has a bill coming due, and they have a bill due for accountability and transparency, and it hasn't been met. And so now's the time to break glass and to do something super bigger, and something, frankly, that I think is in Trump's DNA, and it's Trumpian in that it is, it's big, it's beautiful, and it'll solve the problem.
Well, I think that's the best part of this. I mean, the best part of this is that, as you say, the weaponization of government was systemic. The problem is systemic. And I think about this a lot. How do you describe this to people, right? The problem is systemic. So here you'd say, look, we need one big, beautiful committee to go in for the sake of truth and reconciliation, justice, the justice that everyone wants. That makes a lot of sense to me, because you'd be able to highlight in media kind of the problem, right, in a systemic way. So it's not just getting lost in the weeds of this and that scandal. Okay, great. But at the end of the day, I think that everyone in the audience would understand this commission would have to have subpoena powers and real prosecutorial powers. And for a lot of people, they'd say, wait, is that even possible, outside of the usual channels?
It's 100% possible. I mean, it's happened in recent history, although the functions might be different. Think of Jack Smith. I mean, Jack Smith blew the lid off of that special counsel's office and took it wherever he wanted to go. And that was just through the special counsel statute and delegated authorities. There's nothing in the playbook, so to speak, that says the AG or the president can't delegate authorities that are already in their power. And so it's just a matter of President Trump, via executive order, saying to this new body or individual that'll lead the body, you have the power delegated to you to do X, Y, and Z. That's basically how U.S. attorneys work. U.S. attorneys prosecute based on the delegated authority of the attorney general. And so the whole government runs on delegations upon delegations, all drawing back to the president, of course. And so there's no reason why you cannot create a new mechanism where they have all the tools they need: subpoena power, prosecutorial power, the power to spend money, to offer restitution to people who have been harmed, the opportunity to offer immunity to those who may have known what they were engaged in was wrong and are now willing to testify to it. All of those things. And The precedent of Jack Smith spending well over $10 million and how many prosecutions is already right there. So it's very, very doable.
Yeah, you mentioned restitution there. So what are we looking at when we actually do this? Because we know the weaponization of the government, huge. So what could actually be done?
Yeah, ultimately, it's what we want, right? Like we talk about accountability, it's making the wrongs right. And in some cases, that will be making people who were harmed whole again, whether it's people who didn't get the jab or had some sort of, government consequence attached to it, whether it's J6 defendants who were the misdemeanors that got the 1512 charge and, still are in massive amounts of debt for their, defending themselves in court, which the Supreme Court ultimately threw out all those cases altogether. So whether it's their attorney's fees or whether it's the Catholics that were targeted by the FBI, you name any of these pockets of weaponization, there are people who had their real lives harmed by it, and we can account for that in some sort of monetary way. And I don't think there's a bigger evidence of the government admitting its wrongdoing as a whole than getting a check from the United States Treasury. And again, this isn't unusual. The left does this stuff all the time. I mean, through their sue and settle with the Department of Justice, they were sending money out to environmental groups left and right. There's no reason the Trump administration couldn't afford them to the same tools that the left always uses for this venture.
Well, as you point out, I mean, everyone should go read what you've written about this at Blaze. But, time is of the essence on this. We don't have time to waste. So what do you think? Do you think that the administration has the political will and momentum to make this happen? Can we get this off the ground? Can we make this thing a reality?
Yes, I absolutely do. And that's frankly why I put the piece out, is because nobody is happy. And it's a dark cloud over every kind of agency and department and, folks in the White House right now. Everyone's kind of looking around saying, when are we going to get that accountability, the disclosure, the transparency? Everyone's pointing to either different people or different things as being the hiccup to it, or the legal problem, the logistical problem, or that's their entity, not my entity. And it consumes a lot of energy from the forward advancement of the rest of the America First agenda. And so I think if this were to get off the ground, it would be chiefly because it solves a massive problem for a lot of people, not to mention the major political problem over the entire administration, in that if they do not deliver on this bill that is well beyond due, it's going to color the midterms and it's going to color President Trump's legacy. And I don't think anybody wants that.
Everybody out there, go jump on the socials at It's Your Gov, because as my favorite thing that Mike said the entire segment so far is, nothing's going to happen within Congress. They're broken. The good things happen outside of Congress, and that's why Oversight Project exists. Mike, thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.